What happens when two of country music's biggest personalities clash on live television? And a simple interview question ignites a firestorm that nobody saw coming. Today, we're diving into the explosive confrontation between Keith Urban and Kelly Clarkson that had everyone talking. So, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below because this story gets wild. The Kelly Clarkson show was supposed to be just another routine promotional appearance for Keith Urban. He was there to discuss his latest album, maybe share a few behind-the-scenes stories, and connect with Kelly's massive daytime television audience. But what started as friendly conversation quickly turned into something much more intense when Kelly decided to ask about a topic that clearly struck a nerve. "So Keith, I have to ask you about something that's been making waves in the industry," Kelly began, leaning forward in her chair with that signature smile that usually puts guests at ease. "There's been some talk about authenticity in country music lately, and I'm curious about your thoughts on artists who some say have strayed too far from the genre's roots." Keith's expression shifted almost immediately. The easygoing demeanor he'd maintained throughout the first part of the interview seemed to tighten, and his fingers drummed once against the armrest of his chair. "Well, Kelly, that's quite a loaded question, isn't it? I mean, what exactly are you getting at here?" "I'm just wondering," Kelly continued, seemingly unaware of the tension building, "how you respond to critics who say that some artists, yourself included, have moved too far into pop territory. There was that article last month that specifically mentioned your recent collaborations and questioned whether you're still making country music or if you've crossed over completely." The studio audience, which had been warm and engaged just moments before, seemed to sense the shift in energy. Keith Urban sat back in his chair, and for a moment the only sound was the soft hum of the studio lights overhead. When he finally spoke, his voice carried an edge that hadn't been there before. "You know what, Kelly? I find it interesting that you'd bring up an article like that without even asking me first if I wanted to discuss it. This feels a lot less like an interview and a lot more like an ambush to me." Kelly's eyes widened slightly, clearly caught off guard by Keith's response. "Keith, I didn't mean it that way at all. I'm just trying to have an honest conversation about the evolution of country music. You're one of the most successful artists in the genre, and I thought you'd want to address some of these discussions that are happening." "Address what exactly?" Keith's voice was rising now, and his Australian accent seemed more pronounced as his frustration grew. "Address the fact that people want to put me in a box and tell me what kind of music I should or shouldn't make. Address the fact that apparently success means you're not authentic anymore." The tension in the studio was palpable. Now, Kelly shifted uncomfortably in her seat, clearly realizing that this conversation had taken a turn she hadn't anticipated. "Keith, that's not what I'm saying at all. I think your music is incredible, and I've always been a huge fan. I was just hoping to get your perspective on some of the industry conversations that are happening right now." "My perspective," Keith laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Here's my perspective, Kelly. I've been making music for over 2 decades. I've won multiple Grammy Awards. I've sold millions of albums, and I've stayed true to who I am as an artist throughout all of it. So, when someone sits across from me on national television and basically asks me to defend my artistic choices based on what some critic wrote in a magazine, yeah, I have a problem with that." The studio audience was completely silent now, all eyes focused on the two superstars as their conversation grew more heated by the moment. Kelly took a deep breath, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. "Keith, I really think there's been a misunderstanding here. I wasn't asking you to defend anything. I was simply trying to facilitate a discussion about how country music has evolved, and I thought you might have some insights to share given your experience and success in the industry." A discussion. Keith's voice was sharp now, cutting through the studio air like a knife. "Kelly, let me ask you something. When was the last time someone questioned your authenticity as a pop artist? When was the last time someone suggested that your success meant you weren't being true to your roots? Because I'm willing to bet it doesn't happen very often, does it?" Kelly opened her mouth to respond, but Keith continued before she could speak. "And you know what the real issue is here? It's not about authenticity at all. It's about the fact that country music, more than any other genre, seems to have this obsession with policing its own artists. We're supposed to stay in our lane. We're supposed to sound a certain way. We're supposed to dress a certain way. And God forbid we try to grow or evolve as musicians. Keith, I understand that you're frustrated, Kelly said, her voice taking on a more defensive tone, but I think you're reading something into this conversation that wasn't there. I was asking a legitimate question about industry trends, not making a personal attack on your music or your career. Weren't you, though? Keith shot back, because it sure feels like that's exactly what you were doing. And you know what the most frustrating part is? This kind of conversation happens all the time in country music, but it never seems to happen to certain other artists. It's always the ones who dare to try something different, the ones who collaborate outside the genre, the ones who push boundaries even a little bit. The exchange was becoming more intense with each passing moment, and it was clear that both Keith and Kelly were feeling the heat. The studio audience remained frozen, watching as two beloved entertainers engaged in what was quickly becoming a very public disagreement. Kelly straightened in her chair, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a firmness that matched Keith's intensity. You know what, Keith? I think you're being unfair here. I've had plenty of country artists on this show, and I've never had a conversation go this direction before. Maybe the issue isn't with the questions I'm asking. Maybe the issue is with how you're choosing to interpret them. That statement hit Keith like a slap across the face, and the change in his demeanor was immediate and unmistakable. He leaned forward in his chair, his jaw clenched tight, and when he spoke, his words came out slow and deliberate. So now it's my fault. Now I'm the problem because I don't appreciate being blindsided on your show with questions designed to make me look like I've sold out. That's rich, Kelly. That's really rich. Kelly's face flushed slightly, and it was clear that she was struggling to maintain her composure. Keith, I think we need to take a step back here. This conversation has gotten completely out of hand, and I don't think either of us intended for it to go this direction. Oh, I think you knew exactly where this was going, Keith replied, his voice getting louder with each word. You had that article ready to reference. You had your questions all lined up, and you probably thought I'd just sit here and give you some diplomatic answer about how country music is evolving, and everyone's entitled to their opinion. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I'm not going to play that game. The studio crew was starting to look nervous now, glancing at each other, and then back at the interview that was spiraling completely out of control. Kelly took a deep breath and tried once more to redirect the conversation. Keith, I genuinely did not bring you here today with any intention of ambushing you or making you uncomfortable. I've interviewed hundreds of artists over the years, and I've always tried to ask thoughtful questions that give them a chance to share their perspectives. If I've somehow offended you, that was not my intention. Your intention doesn't matter though, does it? Keith shot back. What matters is what you actually did. And what you did was sit me down in front of your audience and your cameras and basically asked me to justify my artistic